The forest was alive with rage. Wind tore through the trees, bending their spines until they groaned and snapped. Rain fell in sheets, blinding, cold enough to sting the skin. Every root seemed determined to trip her, every thorn to snag at her clothes. Her lungs burned with every breath as she stumbled forward, mud sucking at her boots, her arms wrapped tightly around the trembling pup, pressed against her chest. Its heartbeat was frantic, a tiny drum echoing her own terror. She pressed her cheek against its damp fur and whispered, though her voice shook with fear, "Hold on. Please, just hold on." Behind her, the forest howled. Not the wind, not the storm. Wolves, too many of them. Their cries split the night, sharp and merciless, each one closer than the last. They weren't hunting to feed. They were hunting to end her. She couldn't stop shaking, but it wasn't only the cold. Her mind screamed at her. I wasn't supposed to be here. Not tonight. Not when the whole world was waiting for the mating ceremony to begin. And yet, here she was, running, bleeding, desperate. The storm matched her despair. Every bolt of lightning lit the forest in savage flashes, wet leaves glistening like blades, shadows darting just out of sight. The earth itself seemed against her, sucking at her feet, dragging her down, as if the land wanted her caught. Her knees buckled once. She nearly fell, nearly lost the pup in her arms. The pain from her ankle shot white-hot through her leg, but she gritted her teeth, biting back the cry. If she screamed, if she faltered, if she gave them even a whisper of her weakness, they would find her faster. The pup whimpered. She tightened her hold, fighting through the panic. She couldn't let him go. Not him, not tonight. Thunder cracked overhead, and for a single heartbeat, she saw herself reflected in the storm, fractured, furious, and impossibly small beneath a sky that wanted to swallow her whole. And yet, deep inside, beneath the terror, beneath the brokenness, something stirred, something alive, a faint pulse of light in her veins, flickering like the ember of a fire she didn't dare ignite. Her hands trembled. She knew what that flicker meant, knew what would happen if she lost control. The last time it had surfaced, the last time she'd let it spill free, people had screamed her name, not in reverence, but in horror. No, not now. She shoved it back, burying it, even as it burned against her ribs. She couldn't risk it. Not here, not with so many eyes hunting her already. Her breath came ragged, torn apart by the cold. She pushed deeper into the trees, until she saw it, shadows forming the outline of a cabin, old, abandoned, its roof sagging, its windows dark. It looked like it had been waiting for her. She stumbled toward it, shouldered the door open, and slipped inside. The darkness was suffocating. The air smelled of damp wood and mold. Every floorboard complained beneath her weight. Every wall leaned like it might collapse at the wrong breath. She pressed her back against the door and slid down, clutching the pup, listening to her own heartbeat drum in her ears. The silence inside was louder than the storm, louder than the wolves. A flash of lightning sliced through the cracks in the walls, illuminating the dust that danced in the air. She could almost believe she was safe. Almost, until she heard it. A sound, soft, deliberate. Footsteps outside. Her chest tightened. She pressed a hand against her mouth, holding back a sob. The pup whimpered again, and she prayed, begged silently, "Please, please don't make a sound." The footsteps stopped, right outside the cabin. The storm outside raged on, and she realized it was a mirror of the storm inside her, chaotic, merciless, impossible to quiet. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. Fear throbbed in her throat, but beneath it, something else rose up, defiance. She lowered her gaze to the pup in her arms, its eyes wide, trusting her, depending on her. And in that fragile, fleeting moment, she found a sliver of steel inside herself. Her voice was a whisper, but it cut through the darkness like a blade. "I will not be their prey again." Then, silence, for one breath, two, and in the third, a pair of glowing eyes flared in the dark. Wolf's eyes, watching her, waiting. Blackness swallowed everything. Before we find out what waits for her in the storm, don't forget to subscribe to Clarissa Romance Collections. Every heartbeat of this story will pull you deeper. The glow of those eyes pierced the dark, steady, and unblinking, too intelligent to belong to an ordinary beast. Ilara's breath caught, every muscle in her body locked, though her pulse screamed for her to run. The pup whimpered against her chest, trembling so violently she feared his fragile body might shatter in her arms. Then the silence broke. A crack of wood, a sudden force, and the door burst inward. A massive wolf surged through the opening, its fur slick with rain, its size filling the cabin with an impossible presence. The walls seemed to shrink around him, the very air bending to his will. His paws hit the rotten floorboards with the weight of thunder, his head lowered, golden eyes burning through the storm's darkness, locked only on her. Ilara staggered back, shielding the pup with her own body. Her breath came fast, sharp, panicked. She braced for teeth, for claws, for the tearing end she had run from all night. But the wolf did not strike. The air shimmered around him, heat rippling through the rain-soaked cabin, a glow, faint at first, then blinding, as his form shifted. Bone cracked, muscle bent, fur gave way to skin, and standing where the wolf had been was a man. Not just a man, the Alpha King. His presence was more dangerous than the storm outside. Broad shoulders dripped with rain, scars slashed across his chest, reminders of battles no ordinary wolf could have survived. His hair was dark, heavy with water, falling across a face carved from stone, and his eyes, those molten gold eyes, still glowed as if the wolf lived inside them, staring at her without pity, without fear. Ilara's back hit the wall, her breath breaking in uneven gasps. She tightened her grip around the pup, as if he might take it from her. She tried to speak, but the words tangled in her throat. He broke the silence first. His voice was low, rough, edged like steel. Ilara. Her name, spoken as if it had always belonged to him. It rattled through her bones. No one here should have known her name. Not after everything. Not after the exile, the rejection, the vow never to be claimed again. Her lips parted, but no words came. Fear burned in her chest, tangled with a dangerous pull she didn't understand. He stepped closer. Each stride carried the weight of command, the air tightening with his nearness. The flicker of lightning cut across his features, and she saw more than scars. She saw the exhaustion of a leader who had carried too much, fought too long. "I have been watching," he said, his tone threaded with something darker, heavier, protecting, whether you knew it or not. Ilara shook her head, her voice finally scraping free. "Protecting? You call this protecting? Storm at my back, enemies at my throat, and you standing here like a shadow waiting to strike?" The Alpha King did not flinch. His gaze stayed on her, unreadable. "You survived because I kept them from tearing into you sooner. Don't mistake my silence for absence." Her claws slid free before she realized it, fingertips glowing faint with the same cursed power she had buried deep. She held them out, trembling but steady enough to make her warning clear. "Stay back." The Alpha did not move. His lips curled, not in mockery, but in recognition. "You think I fear that fire of yours? No, Ilara. I have seen worse. I have been worse." Her heart slammed in her chest. She should have struck, should have driven him out, but her body betrayed her. The storm outside faded to a dull roar, all of her awareness fixed on the man before her. His voice softened, a dangerous shift. "You don't trust me. Good, you shouldn't. Trust is for the blind, and you see too much." The words cut her, because they were true. She had trusted once before, and it had destroyed everything. Still, she pushed back, words sharp as her claws. "If you think I'll fall in line, bow my head, hand over what's mine, you're no different than the rest of them." For the first time, something flickered across his face. Pain, anger, recognition. He closed the distance in a breath, the heat of him pressing against the storm's cold that still clung to her skin. His hand lifted, not to strike, but to hover inches from her arm, as if asking without words, "I don't want what's yours. I want the truth. Why are you carrying his pup?" The question shattered through the cabin louder than thunder. Alara froze. The pup stirred against her chest, small body twitching, as if it too recognized the weight of his words. She could have lied, could have deflected, but her silence spoke louder than any answer. The Alpha's gaze hardened, his jaw tightening as he searched her face, his hand lowered, fists curling at his side as if holding back a storm of his own. Before he could press further, the air shifted. A sound, low, guttural, rose outside the cabin. Not the voices of the storm, not the cry of ordinary wolves. Shadow moved through the trees, darker than the night itself. Alara Sep's chest tightened. She knew that presence. The Alpha King's head snapped toward the sound, nostrils flaring, body tensing. He moved without hesitation, stepping in front of her, between her and the door. The first shadow wolf crashed through the doorway, eyes like pits, fur swallowing the light. Its growl vibrated the floor beneath their feet. The Alpha shifted in a heartbeat, muscle tearing, bones snapping, his body folding and rising into the massive wolf she had seen before. His roar ripped through the cabin, shaking the walls. He met the beast head-on, claws and teeth colliding in a storm of violence. Wood splintered, dust rained down. The pup screamed against her chest. Another shadow wolf lunged. Alara spun, dodging, her claws sparking light as she struck its side. Pain jolted up her arm, the force of impact throwing her against the wall. But she held the pup tighter, refusing to let him go. The Alpha fought like nothing she had ever seen. Every strike was brutal, precise, meant to kill. The cabin became a battlefield, snarls, crashes, lightning flickering through shattered wood. And when the last shadow wolf fell, its body dissolving into smoke, the Alpha shifted back. Blood streaked his skin, his chest heaving with each breath. His golden eyes locked onto her, fierce and unyielding. He took one step toward her, his voice raw from the fight. "Now, answer me. Why are you running with his pups?" Her throat closed. Words rose, tangled, refused to form. Her silence was louder than thunder, louder than the storm still raging beyond the walls. And in that silence, the air between them burned, uncertain, dangerous, and alive. The silence after the battle was almost worse than the chaos that had come before. Smoke still hung in the air where the shadow wolves had dissolved, the cabin walls scarred, splintered, trembling on their broken frame. Rain dripped through the roof, pattering against the floor like an impatient drum. The Alpha King's question lingered, heavier than any strike. "Why are you running with his pups?" Alara didn't answer. She couldn't. The words were locked somewhere behind her ribs, tangled with pain she had carried too long, secrets that had branded her from the moment she had been born. Her throat ached with the weight of them, and yet silence felt safer than truth. Her eyes fell to the pup, pressed against her chest. His breathing was shallow but steady now, his small body fragile, vulnerable, alive, because she had refused to let go. She stroked his fur with a trembling hand, clinging to the rhythm of his heartbeat. In him, she saw a reflection of herself, helpless once, hunted always, spared only by chance and defiance. The Alpha's shadow loomed near, his presence too sharp, too commanding to ignore. But her mind pulled her somewhere else, backward, into the places she had buried for years. She remembered the first time the fire had flickered under her skin. She had been a child, too young to understand what it meant, too desperate to belong to notice the way the elders' eyes changed when they saw it. Her cousins had laughed, daring her to light the candles with her breath, and when she had done it, without touching, without flame, they had screamed instead of clapped. Her mother had pulled her close that night, whispering words meant to soothe, but even then Alara had seen the fear trembling in her eyes. "You must never show them again," she had said. "Do you hear me? Never. Hide it. For your sake, for mine." But children can't always hide. And Alara had never been meant to. By the time she reached her first shift, the whispers had already spread. They called her cursed, tainted, not wolf enough to trust, not human enough to forgive. When she bled for the first time, silver fire seared across her veins, bursting from her skin in a blaze no one could contain. She had cried out in agony, begging for help, but they had only stepped back, watching, judging. The alpha of her pack had stood before her, voice sharp, eyes cold. "You are dangerous," he had said, "and danger has no place among the weak." They had cast her out that night. No trial, no mercy. She had been 15 years old, barefoot, shivering beneath the weight of rejection, her mother's tears staining the earth where she had fallen, and not one wolf had stepped forward to defend her. Alara blinked against the memory, her body trembling in the cabin shadows. Rage seared through her, hot and relentless, but beneath it was something more painful. Shame, that she had once begged them to let her stay, that she had once believed she might still belong. The Alpha King's voice cut through her thoughts, low and unyielding. "You've carried this too long. I can see it in your eyes." Her head snapped up, fury flashing. "You see nothing." But his gaze didn't waver. Those golden eyes pierced through her defenses, steady, relentless. "I see someone who's been broken, and still stands. Someone who burns inside, but would rather bleed than show her fire." Her chest tightened. He wasn't supposed to understand. He wasn't supposed to touch the places she had sealed shut with years of silence. "Alara," he said her name again. Softer this time, almost reverent. "That flame in you, it is no curse. It is a bloodline older than any of them dared admit." Her stomach twisted. She had heard whispers of it herself, long ago, before they had silenced her with exile. The silver flame, a line so rare, so feared, that entire wars had been fought to erase it, a gift of the first wolf who had walked between worlds, half spirit, half flesh, power that could save or destroy, depending on the heart that wielded it. And it lived inside her veins. Her breath shuddered. "Do you know what they did to me? Do you know how they looked at me, like I was a monster they couldn't kill, so they cut me out instead?" The Alpha stepped closer, slow, careful, as if moving toward a wounded creature that might bolt. "They feared what they didn't understand." She laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "No, they understood enough. They knew I could burn them to ash, if I ever stopped being afraid, and that was the sin they couldn't forgive." Her words shook, torn between rage and sorrow, and for the first time in years, tears threatened her eyes. She turned away, hating the weakness, hating that he was here to see it. But he didn't push. He didn't mock. He stood there, steady as the storm outside, letting her fury crash like waves against him. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, threaded with something fragile. "Do you know what it's like? To grow up believing you were born wrong, to beg for their love, their approval, only to be told you are the proof of everything they feared." The silence that followed was heavy, aching. Then his voice. She froze. The word cut through her anger like a knife, sharp and unexpected. She turned to him, searching his face, and for a heartbeat she saw it. The shadow in his eyes, the grief carved into the lines of his mouth. "What did they do to you?" she asked before she could stop herself. He didn't answer immediately. His gaze dropped to the scars across his chest, as if they held the story written on his skin. When he finally spoke, it was with a raw honesty she hadn't expected. "They tried to make me a weapon. When I refused, they tried to make me a ghost. Neither worked." Ilara's breath caught. His pain was different, but the shape of it was the same. Rejection, betrayal, survival. And for the first time, her anger eased, just a fraction, replaced by something far more dangerous, recognition. She tightened her arms around the pup, grounding herself in the fragile warmth against her chest. Her voice shook. "I don't want your pity." He stepped closer, golden eyes burning with something that wasn't pity at all. "It isn't pity, it's truth. And I see you, Alara, all of you. The fire, The scars, the strength they tried to bury. I see it, and I don't turn away. Her chest ached, cracked wide open by words she had never heard before. She wanted to reject them, to shove him back into the storm. But she couldn't, because a flicker of hope, small, fragile, terrifying, sparked inside her. Hope that maybe she wasn't doomed to walk this path alone. Her walls shook, crumbling in places she had sworn would never break, and though fear still clung to her, though shame still whispered in her ear, another voice rose inside her, one she hadn't heard in years. What if he's right? What if the fire was never a curse at all? She closed her eyes, holding back the tears that threatened to fall, and for the first time since her exile, she let herself breathe without hiding. The storm outside raged on, but inside the cabin, something shifted. Not peace, not safety, something more dangerous. Connection. And in that fragile connection, her torment did not vanish, but it changed. Anger softened into sorrow. Sorrow gave way to something she had thought she'd lost forever. A flicker of hope. The storm had not ended. It had simply changed its song. By the time the Alpha King led Alara from the ruin of the cabin, the rain had quieted into a steady veil, washing the blood from the earth, cleansing the path ahead. The night was heavy with scents, too old for the human world to recognize. Moss, stone, and something older still, something that vibrated in the marrow of her bones. She did not ask where he was taking her. She clutched the pup close and followed, each step carved by both resistance and a pull she could not name. His stride was unyielding, his silence the kind that pressed against the skin. When he finally spoke, it was not explanation, but command. Do not fight what waits for you. The forest thickened, branches weaving above them, like a cathedral of shadows, and then sudden, open air. A clearing, vast and impossibly alive. Fireflies drifted like constellations pulled down from the heavens, their glow soft but endless. In the center, stones older than kingdoms stood in a ring, each carved with runes that pulsed faintly, as though hearts beat within them. Alara froze at the threshold. Her pulse quickened, skin prickling with something too vast to name. The air hummed with recognition, as if the grove itself knew her. "What is this place?" she whispered. The Alpha King's gaze lingered on her, unreadable, before he answered. "Where the first wolves were chosen, where the veil between flesh and spirit is thin enough for truth to pass through. The grove of blood and flame." Her breath caught. She had heard stories, fragments muttered by outcasts, myths her mother had silenced with fear. But standing here, those whispers became weight, undeniable. The runes flared brighter as she stepped closer. One by one they awakened, like eyes opening from a long slumber, until the entire circle glowed. She should have turned back. She should have run. Yet her feet carried her forward, as if the ground beneath her no longer allowed retreat. And then the voices came. At first, faint, like wind through dead leaves. But as she crossed into the circle, they rose, layered and endless, voices too many to count. Men, women, wolves, all merging into a single current of sound that wrapped around her soul. Ilara. Her name, but not from the Alpha. It came from everywhere, ancient and reverent, like the earth itself had waited centuries just to speak it. Her knees trembled. She clutched the pup tighter, as if his small weight tethered her to flesh, while her spirit stretched toward something vast and terrible. "Do not fear them," the Alpha King murmured, voice low, as though afraid to break whatever power surrounded them. "They are your blood. They have waited." Light surged from the stones, weaving into the air, forming shapes, wolf bodies vast as mountains, eyes burning like suns. Ancestors, spirits, the ones who had shaped the first packs with their breath. They circled her, towering and infinite, and she could not breathe under the enormity of their presence. A single voice cut through the storm of whispers, clear as fire crackling in the dark. "Child of the flame." Her body shook, her heart slammed against her ribs. The spirit's form shifted, its eyes silver, its jaws like carved stone. It lowered its massive head toward her, and in its breath she smelled ash and eternity. You carry what was never meant to die, the silver flame, blood of spirit, curse, and crown. You will be the knife that divides, or the hand that heals. Child of the flame will either save the packs or end them. The words pierced her, sinking deeper than any wound. Images burst behind her eyes. Wolves kneeling, wolves burning, rivers of fire splitting forests into dust. She saw herself at the center of it all, both savior and destroyer, both queen and executioner. Her breath shattered into the cold night. No, I don't want this. The grove did not care what she wanted. The spirits pressed closer, their voices layering, thunderous and unstoppable. There is no want. There is only what is written. Her chest caved with dread. She wanted to scream, to run, to claw herself free from the fate being draped across her shoulders. But beneath the terror, another feeling coiled, dark, sharp, undeniable, recognition, as if some hidden part of her had always known. The Alpha King stepped closer, his shadow touching hers. He spoke not to the spirits, but to her, voice low and steady. You feel it, don't you? That pull, that truth. It's not chains they place on you, Alara. It's a crown. She turned to him, firelight dancing across his scarred face, golden eyes locked on hers. His voice dropped to a whisper that struck deeper than any thunder. You were never meant to serve. You were meant to rule. The words tore through her defenses like claws. They ignited something she had buried beneath shame and exile. Rule. Not beg for belonging. Not crawl for scraps of loyalty from those who had spat her out. Rule. Her body trembled, torn between awe and dread. The spirits' voices swelled again, echoing the Alpha's conviction. Rule or ruin. Flame or ash. The choice is yours, child of the flame. The fireflies spun faster, their glow blurring into streaks of light, as if the stars themselves were listening. The pup whimpered in her arms, sensing the storm inside her. Alara pressed him tighter, grounding herself in his fragile warmth, even as destiny wrapped its claws around her throat. She wanted to deny it, to scream that she was no savior, no queen, nothing but a cast-off girl who had survived on scraps and fury. Yet the grove, the spirits, even the man beside her, all of it bore down with one truth she could no longer ignore. She was not made to hide. She was made to burn. Her lips parted, her voice raw, broken, but unflinching. If what you say is true, then everything I touch may die. The Alpha's eyes narrowed, fierce and unyielding. Or everything you touch may finally live. The grove pulsed once more, a heartbeat of the earth itself, before the runes dimmed and the spirits receded, leaving silence in their wake. But the weight of their prophecy clung to Alara's skin, etched into her bones. She stood in the circle, heart divided, flame flickering at her fingertips unseen, between awe and terror, hope and ruin, between what she feared she was and what she might yet become. And for the first time, she wondered if her exile had not been the end of her story at all, but its beginning. The grove had given her no rest. Its silence followed her like a shadow, heavier than the voices of the dead, and yet there was no time to breathe, no time to reckon with the crown of fire pressed against her soul. The world had already felt the shift in her, and the world would not let it pass unchallenged. The mating ceremony was meant to be a night of union, a binding of strength and tradition. Torches lined the great clearing, flames swaying in the wind, throwing restless shadows over the gathered packs. Wolves in their forms prowled at the edges, their eyes gleaming, their growls carrying unease through the night air. The moon stood swollen above, watching with a cold, unblinking gaze. Alara stood at the edge, the pup still clutched against her chest, his tiny heartbeat, the only thing tethering her to calm. She could feel them staring at her, the whispers cutting sharper than any blade. Her name slithered through the crowd, wrapped in poison. Outcast, stranger, cursed. The Alpha King stood tall at her side, his presence vast and unyielding, golden eyes daring anyone to step forward. For a moment, the firelight seemed to bend toward him, as though the night itself bowed, but then the hush shattered. A rival alpha stepped from the sea of wolves, his form shifting until flesh replaced fur. Broad, scarred, his voice carrying the weight of venom, his pack bristled behind him like spears ready to pierce. "She carries death," he spat, his fingers stabbing the air toward Alara. "I smell the fire in her blood. Do you not see it? Do you not feel it? She is the cursed one your elders warned of, the one who will tear this world apart." A ripple moved through the gathered wolves. Growls deepened, claws dug into soil. Fear had always been a language Pax understood too well. Alara's breath hitched. The pup whimpered, pressing closer into her arms, as if even he knew the air was turning hostile. The accusation wasn't new. It had been her sentence since childhood. But here, in front of them all, it burned hotter, sharper. She wanted to vanish. She wanted to scream. The Alpha King stepped forward, his voice like thunder cracking through the night. "She is under my protection." But the rival only laughed, cruel and sharp. "Protection or blindness? Have you bedded your own ruin, King? Look at her. Look at the flame waiting in her veins. You would sacrifice your people for her?" The crowd broke into chaos, voices overlapping, wolves snapping at the air, the heat of distrust thick as smoke. Some shouted her name as a curse, others spat old prophecies, and above it all, the rival Alpha's voice rose, relentless. "She is no mate. She is a weapon waiting to slaughter us all." Alara's pulse roared in her ears. Her knees trembled, not from fear but from the rage coiling tight inside her chest. Sparks prickled at her fingertips, faint, but there silver glimmers against her skin. She clenched her fists, forcing it down, knowing if they saw it, if they truly saw what the grove had awakened in her, the whispers would become war. Then came the first blow. A wolf lunged from the shadows, eyes gleaming with hate, teeth bared for her throat. She barely had time to twist away before the Alpha King intercepted, shifting mid-leap, fur bursting over muscle, claws raking across the attacker's chest. Blood sprayed, hot and metallic, spattering across her skin. The world erupted. Wolves collided in snarls and roars, the ceremony torn apart in seconds. Claws tore earth, teeth ripped flesh, torches toppled, flames racing across dry grass, painting the night in chaos. Alara stumbled back, the pup screaming in her arms, as two bodies crashed before her, fur and blood twisting together. Her heart pounded, her breath ragged, the violence pressing closer from every side. She saw the Alpha King in the midst of it, golden fur blazing in firelight, his claws a storm of death as he cut down every wolf who dared strike toward her. His growls were not just fury, they were warning, possession, promise. But the rival's voice carried even over the carnage. "Do you see it now? He defends her as if she were queen. And for what? For a curse that will burn us all." More wolves turned, eyes sharp, torn between loyalty and fear. She saw it in their faces, that flicker of doubt, that hesitation that could turn an army into her executioners. Alara's chest ached. She wanted to cry out that she had not asked for this, that she had never wanted to carry fire in her blood, but her voice would mean nothing against centuries of prophecy, against the stink of fear. Another wolf lunged. She fell back against the dirt, her body twisting to shield the pup. Pain ripped down her arm as claws grazed her skin. Sparks flared from her blood where the wound opened, silver light spilling across the ground. Gasps, growls, silence, then uproar. They had seen. "She burns," someone cried. "She carries the fire of ruin." The Alpha King tore through the wolf that had struck her, his roar splitting the air, but even he could not silence the tide. Wolves surged, not just against him, but against her. The air was thick with blood, fire, and betrayal. And then it happened. For the first time, her control cracked. Silver flame leapt from her skin, wild and searing, lighting the night like a second moon. Wolves stumbled back, eyes wide, their snarls turning to howls of fear. The fire licked across the ground, but did not burn her, wrapping instead like armor, alive, furious. She froze, horror and awe colliding in her chest. This was what they feared. This was what the grove had named. The Alpha King shifted back to flesh, blood streaking his body, his eyes blazing molten gold as he turned to her. For one moment, for one breath, she saw it, the choice written in his face, his people bleeding at his feet, their voices screaming that she was death, and her, standing bathed in forbidden fire. Would he choose them? Or her? The hesitation cut her deeper than any claw. His jaw tightened, his breath ragged, but his answer did not come fast enough. And in that silence, her heart broke. Tears blurred her vision. She clutched the pup tighter, her voice no louder than a whisper, but heavy enough to shatter the bond that had begun to grow. "I'll never be your burden." And before he could move, before he could reach her, she turned and fled, silver fire trailing behind her like a curse, like a crown, like the end of everything. The night swallowed her flight, each breath a ragged blade in her throat. The silver fire had ebbed, leaving only ash on her skin and a tremor deep in her bones. She clutched the pup as she ran, stumbling through roots and stone, until her body finally betrayed her, knees buckling, palms tearing against cold earth. She had meant to keep going, to vanish into the endless dark, but her body bled and her heart cracked, and the forest no longer offered strength. And then, his scent, musk, iron, smoke. The Alpha King was on her before she heard his steps. His hand caught her arm as she fell, steadying her when she would rather have shattered. "Let me go," she rasped, throat raw. His golden eyes burned in the dark, but there was no command in them now, only a rawness that almost looked like pleading. "You'll die if I do." She should have fought him. She should have pulled free and disappeared, leaving him to his people and their fear. But the pup whimpered against her chest, and her body was too heavy, her wounds too deep. When he lifted her into his arms, she did not resist. The cave was hidden, carved into the belly of stone where the moonlight could not reach. A fire flickered in its hollow, casting trembling shadows across rough walls. He set her down gently, his hands sure but not unkind, and for the first time since the chaos, silence pressed between them. Alara leaned back against the wall, her breathing shallow, the pup nestled in the crook of her arm. She should have hated him for hesitating, for letting the voices of his people cut so deep into her flesh. Yet here he was, kneeling at her side, stripping cloth from his own cloak to bind her bleeding arm. His fingers brushed her skin, calloused, scarred, yet gentle. She flinched, not from pain, but from the heat that surged where he touched. "You fight like the world has always been against you," he murmured, eyes fixed on the wound he was binding. Her laugh was brittle, humorless. "That's because it has." For a moment, neither spoke. The fire crackled, its glow softening the hard lines of his face. When he finally looked up, his gaze was unguarded. "Do you think I don't know that weight?" He pulled his shirt aside, revealing scars carved deep into his chest and ribs, jagged, angry reminders of battles fought and survived. Every mark is a reminder of what they demanded of me. Every scar is a lesson in how little an alpha is allowed to want for himself. Ilara's breath caught, the firelight tracing each line across his flesh. Not trophies, not victories, burdens, proof of how much he had bled to keep standing. Slowly, her hand lifted, as if drawn without her will, fingertips grazing one of the longest scars across his ribs. He didn't flinch, he only held her gaze, steady and unyielding, as if daring her to see him, not as alpha, but as man. Her throat tightened. "I never wanted their fear," she whispered. "I never wanted prophecy, or fire. I only wanted to be seen." The words spilled out before she could cage them, raw and trembling, her secret laid bare. His jaw clenched, something fierce and unspoken moving in his golden eyes. "Ilara," he said, her name softer than she'd ever heard it. I see you, all of you. The silence that followed trembled with something more dangerous than violence, yearning. The kind that stripped the world bare, until only two people existed. Their faces drew closer, shadows flickering across lips, almost touching. The pup stirred, whimpering softly, grounding her in the fragile moment. She felt his breath brush hers, her heart slamming against ribs that felt too fragile to contain it. And then, fate interrupted. A howl split the night, distant but sharp, echoing through the cave like a warning. Both froze, the fragile thread between them snapping under the weight of reality. His head turned, every line of his body tightening, the warrior returning to the surface. Alara's chest ached at the loss, at the kiss that hovered just out of reach. She turned her gaze to the fire, voice barely a whisper. I don't want your crown. I only wanted to be seen. The words lingered in the cave, softer than smoke, heavier than stone. He did not answer, not with words, but the way his hand hovered close to hers, not touching, not pulling away, told her more than any vow could. The fire in the cave had barely died when dawn cracked its fragile silence. For a moment, the world was quiet, too quiet, as though it held its breath before a storm that could not be stopped. Alara thought she would have one more night hidden in that cave, one more stolen hour to pretend the world outside did not exist, but the world never granted such mercy. By the time they reached the council's hall, summoned under the weight of ritual and demand, whispers were already waiting. The air thickened with the scent of fear, sharpened by suspicion. The chamber was heavy stone, banners of the old bloodlines hanging like shadows overhead. She walked in at his side, every step a battle against the eyes that cut at her like blades. And then betrayal. A voice rose from within the gathered ranks, familiar, intimate, a voice that should have been her shield. His Beta, the one who had guided her in silence when no one else dared. His brother in arms, the one she had almost believed was ally. She carries the blood of the cursed line. The words shattered the chamber. Gasps tore through the air, heads turned, and the circle of wolves drew back from her, as though her skin itself burned with disease. Alara stood frozen, the pup in her arms pressing against her chest. She felt the truth peel open like raw flesh. They knew. They had always suspected, but now it was laid bare for all to devour. The Alpha King's jaw tightened, his body still as stone beside her, but he said nothing. That silence cut deeper than the Beta Sep's betrayal. The council moved swiftly, circling her like hunters. One elder's voice boomed, heavy with righteous certainty. She is dangerous. The prophecy warned us. Her fire will consume us all. Already she brings blood to sacred ground. Another added, we welcomed her, and death followed. Do you not see? This is not chance. It is fate. Each voice was a blade, twisting the old words into shackles. She felt the prophecy's weight like chains at her throat, twisted, bent, reshaped until she was no longer woman but curse. Alara looked at him, at the Alpha whose golden eyes had once steadied her. He could end this, with one word. He could silence them. Command loyalty as only a king could. But he hesitated. His gaze flickered, not away, but inward, battling something she could not reach. His hands clenched, veins standing in stark relief, but no words left his mouth, no defiance, no shield. The pack saw his silence, and they roared with it. She is cursed. She carries ruin. Her fire is death. Every voice piled upon her shoulders, every accusation a weight pressing her further into the abyss. Her chest heaved, breath breaking, eyes burning not with tears but with fury. She could no longer hold back. She had run, she had begged, she had stayed silent, and still, they would not see her as anything but their doom. Something cracked inside her. The pup whimpered as heat surged through her veins, her body trembling under the force of it. She tried to contain it, tried to cage it as she had done for years, but cages shatter when pressure grows too heavy. Silver fire erupted from her skin. It spread like liquid lightning, bursting from her hands, her hair, her eyes, consuming the council's hall with searing brilliance. Stone walls groaned under its heat, banners curled into ash. Elders stumbled back, their authority burning into dust before they could summon command. The beta, the betrayer, screamed as the fire licked at his cloak, searing flesh. Wolves shifted in panic, claws scraping against stone, as they scrambled to escape the inferno. Through it all, she stood at the center, the blaze curling around her like a crown she never asked for. Her voice cut through the chaos, sharp, unyielding, breaking on the edges of grief. You want your prophecy? Here it is. The chamber cracked, stone splitting under the force of her fury. Ash rained from the ceiling, sparks scattering like shattered stars. The Alpha King did not move. He stood before her, eyes wide, fire reflecting in golden depths that betrayed the war inside him. One step forward, and he would burn. One step back, and she would shatter. Her fire surged higher, breaking through stone and sky, until the council's hall was no longer sanctuary but ruin. And in the silence after the screams, when the last of the banners fell in ash, she stood trembling, silver fire still dancing in the hollow of her palms. Her voice, raw and ragged, barely more than a whisper, carried into the ruin. I will never beg to be seen again. The ruins of the council still smoked when the sky itself began to split. Alara stood at the center, ash clinging to her hair, silver fire pulsing beneath her skin. Every breath she took was thunder, every heartbeat a drum of defiance. The pack had scattered in fear, but fear no longer bound her. For the first time, she did not try to hide her power. She claimed it. The ground shivered beneath her bare feet, stones fracturing as though the earth recognized its sovereign. The air crackled with heat, pulling fireflies of molten silver into the night. Wolves watched from the shadows, their eyes wide, their bodies crouched low in a mixture of awe and dread. And then, the world answered her. From the broken soil, ancestral wolves rose, their forms carved from mist and starlight, massive, spectral, their howls echoing through the marrow of every living creature. They circled her, not as enemies, but as sentinels, guardians awakened by blood they could not deny. Alara lifted her head, the silver fire glowing brighter with each breath. For years they had named her curse. For years she had believed them, but as the earth bent and spirits rose at her command, a truth seared through her bones. She was no curse. She was the reckoning. The Alpha King stepped toward her, his golden eyes fixed, torn between awe and terror. His lips parted, but before he could speak, the air curdled. From the smoke of ruin, another figure emerged. The Shadow Alpha. His presence was a wound in the world, black fur rippling into smoke, eyes red as fresh blood, every step dripping venom into the soil. Where Alara's fire breathed life, his shadow suffocated it. Grass shriveled beneath his claws. Stone blackened under his weight. The pack shrank back further, their fear coalescing into silence. Alara, his voice was a growl that rattled bone. Child of fire, pawn of prophecy, do you not see? You were never meant to save them. You were born to break them. His gaze slid to the Alpha King, taunting. And you always knew. You watched her burn from the edges of the dark, and still believed she could be tamed. Alara's body trembled, not from fear, but from fury. Her palms lit with silver fire, brighter, sharper, until the night was carved in flame. I am no one's pawn, she said, her voice cutting through the silence, steady despite the storm inside her. Not yours, not theirs, not prophecies. The Shadow Alpha's smile widened, cruel and jagged. He lunged, a beast of darkness colliding with her blaze. The clash shook the world. Fire and shadow collided, sending shockwaves tearing through the ground. Trees split, earth cracked, the sky itself bled with fractured lightning. Ancestral wolves leapt into the fray, their spectral forms slamming against the shadow's tendrils, each impact a storm of light against void. Alara roared, her body alive with heat, as she threw flame into the beast's chest, but his darkness swallowed, smothered, twisting fire into smoke. His claws raked across her arm, slicing deep, blood hissing against the blaze. She staggered, but did not fall. The Alpha King surged forward, shifting mid-stride into the massive wolf of gold and ash. He tore into shadow, his fangs closing around the beast's throat. For a moment, light pierced the dark, but the shadow Alpha twisted, dissolving into smoke, reforming behind him. His claws drove into the king's flank, dragging crimson across fur. Ilara Sep's scream split the air. Silver fire exploded from her chest, a tidal wave of light that forced the shadow Alpha back, his body unraveling before reforming, stronger, darker. "You cannot kill shadow," he hissed, circling her. "You cannot burn what has no flesh. You are fire, yes, but fire feeds me. Every spark you cast, I grow." Her chest heaved, pain slicing her lungs. He was right. Her power alone could not consume him. Fire devours what it touches, but shadow is not flesh. It is absence, hunger. And yet, the ancestral wolves howled, circling tighter, their starlit eyes burning with knowledge older than stone. One brushed against her hand, its form warm and weightless. A voice, not heard but felt, thundered inside her skull. "You are flame, but not only flame. You are life. Fire is not just death, it is rebirth." Ilara's breath caught, chest shuddering with the revelation. She closed her eyes, letting the fire rise, not as rage, not as destruction, but as light. When her eyes opened, silver fire poured from her in waves, no longer scorching, but illuminating. The ground beneath her feet burst into bloom, flowers erupting from ash, grass weaving through cracks in stone. The shadow Alpha faltered, his form flickering, his claws striking at air that burned him, not with heat, but with truth. "I am not your sacrifice," she said, her voice rising, carrying like a clarion call through the chaos. "I am not prophecy's chain, not the council's curse, not your weapon. I am fire, and fire chooses." She raised her arms, and the ancestral wolves bowed. Silver fire climbed their forms, fusing spirit with flame, until they blazed like constellations given teeth. Together they launched at the shadow Alpha, their jaws tearing at his smoke, dragging it apart thread by thread. The world trembled, every heartbeat a war drum. The Alpha King dragged himself upright, blood soaking his fur, his golden eyes locking onto hers. He did not command her. He did not try to shield her. He simply stood, battered and broken, but with his weight beside hers, not above. The shadow Alpha screamed, his form unraveling under the assault of flame and spirit. His body thrashed, his darkness collapsing inward, condensing into a core of pure void that pulsed like a dying star. Ilara staggered forward, silver fire blazing from her chest, her hands, her eyes. She reached into the void, grasped the core of shadow with fingers of flame, and held. The darkness writhed, trying to consume her, but she refused to release. Every memory of exile, every scar of rejection, every betrayal, she poured them into the fire, not as chains but as fuel. The void screamed, shrinking, until it was nothing but ash on her palm. And then silence. The earth steadied. The sky cleared. The ancestral wolves bowed once more, before fading into starlight. Ilara fell to her knees, her fire dimming, her chest heaving with exhaustion, but her hands still glowed faintly, not with destructive heat, but with warmth, a steady, enduring flame. The Alpha King limped toward her, blood still dripping, his body trembling. He lowered himself beside her, golden eyes fierce but soft, his voice hoarse. "You are no curse, Ilara. You are everything." But before she could answer, before the fragile breath of peace could settle, the air shifted. From the ashes of shadow, a low growl rumbled. The true battle was not over. In destiny, fragile as a thread, swayed between fire and dark. The battlefield still breathed smoke. Ash drifted on the wind like gray snow, soft enough to seem harmless, but heavy with the weight of what had been burned away. Ilara knelt there, her hands trembling, her chest heaving with the remnants of fire still coursing through her blood. The ground bore the scars of her fury, charred earth, shattered stone, blossoms of life blooming, where her flame had chosen to heal instead of destroy. The wolves that once circled in fear now lingered at the edges, uncertain, their ears pressed flat, their eyes wide. Some crouched low, ready to flee at the next spark. Others leaned forward, their bodies pulled toward her light, as though they could not help themselves. And you, if you had been there, standing among them, what would you have done? Would you have recoiled, whispering monster as her power lit the night? Or would you have felt that pull, that undeniable thread tugging your heart toward her blaze, begging you to step closer even if it burned? The Alpha King's shadow fell across her. He stood battered, his golden eyes dimmed with pain, yet alive with something fiercer, something raw. He did not bow. He did not retreat. He simply stayed. And in that stillness, in that silent choice, there was a vow stronger than words. But the others, their whispers carried. Cursed, dangerous, too powerful, not meant to rule, not meant to live. And I ask you, listening now, would you have spoken those words? Would you have let fear decide for you? Or would you have followed her, even knowing the cost? Because make no mistake, power like hers never comes without a price. She bore it in her scars, in the fire that refused to dim no matter how much she begged it to. And still she stood, trembling but unbroken, daring the world to name her something other than prey. Would you have dared to stand beside her? The night held its breath as she lifted her face, her silver-lit eyes sweeping across those who had once called her outcast. She did not plead. She did not demand. She simply was. And sometimes being fully, unapologetically, was more terrifying than any blade. And here is the truth. No one dared speak aloud. They were not afraid because she might destroy them. They were afraid because, deep down, they longed to follow her, because something in their marrow whispered that fire like hers was not meant to be caged. So, what about you? Would you have feared her, or followed her? The answer lingers in the silence, in the place where fear and yearning intertwine. And if her fire touched you, if even for a breath you felt your own chest ignite with her defiance, her strength, her aching hunger to be seen, then don't let it end here. Join us. Step closer to the flame. Subscribe to Clarissa Romance Collections, where every love story burns brighter than the moon, and every heartbeat dares to defy fate itself. Because this was not the end. It was only the spark. Dawn bled slowly across the ruined horizon, pale light spilling over fractured stone and smoldering earth. The night had been fire and fury, a clash of prophecy and blood, but now, the world seemed to hold its breath. Ilara stepped into that half-light, silver ash clinging to her cloak, her pulse still thrumming with the remnants of the storm she had unleashed. Behind her, the council's hall lay in ruin, its banners nothing more than curling embers drifting on the wind. She did not look back, not once. The pups pressed close at her sides, small bodies trembling, their paws scuffing softly against the broken ground. Their whimpers were hushed now, quieted not by comfort, but by instinct, as though even they sensed the world was listening, watching, waiting. Her steps were slow but steady. With each one, the silence seemed to thicken, broken only by the hollow echo of stone cracking under her feet. She walked as though carrying the weight of every accusation, every whisper of curse and prophecy, but there was no bend in her spine, only defiance. The Alpha King stood far behind, rooted where the fire had left him. He did not follow. Not yet. Perhaps fear bound his feet, perhaps duty, or perhaps the sight of her, burning, unbowed, untouchable, was something he did not yet know how to chase. Ilara did not wait for him. She had waited too long already. The horizon opened, and she reached it. But the earth did not let her go quietly. A tremor rippled beneath her, subtle at first, like the heartbeat of something vast, slumbering deep below. The pups froze, ears twitching, their eyes wide with instinctive terror. Alara halted, her breath misting in the cold dawn air. The tremor grew. Cracks spiderwebbed across the ground, thin at first, then gaping, groaning, as if the very bones of the earth were breaking open. From those fractures rose a sound, low, guttural, ancient, a growl that belonged not to wolf or man, but to something older, darker. Ilara's hand tightened around the smallest pup, pulling it close. Her eyes, still faintly glowing with silver fire, scanned the horizon. The dawn seemed to falter, dimmed by a shadow rising in its path. And then came the voice. It did not belong to the living. It came from the fissures, from the trembling earth itself, a whisper threaded with centuries of hunger. She is not the only one. The words slithered through the air, brushing against her skin like cold steel. The pups whimpered louder, tails tucked, pressing themselves against her legs. Alara's chest tightened, every instinct screaming to run, yet her feet rooted to the earth. The whisper deepened, heavy now, laden with promise and threat. The true alpha has yet to rise. Silence followed. The ground stilled. The fissures closed as though they had never been. But the echo remained. It clung to her skin, her bones, her blood. Alara swallowed hard, the fire within her flickering uncertainly. For the first time since the blaze consumed the hall, she felt the icy edge of doubt. What if she was not the end of the prophecy, but only its beginning? She turned her face to the horizon, where dawn burned weak against the threat of what had stirred beneath. The pups leaned into her, trembling, trusting, and she knew, whatever rose next, whatever shadow the voice had promised, she would face it. Fire was no longer her curse. It was her weapon. And yet, even as she stepped forward into the fragile light, the weight of those words followed her. The true alpha has yet to rise. It was not over. It had only just begun. The music swells, low, haunting, threaded with the beat of a distant drum. And then, silence.